welcome to episode 28 of the One Life Church podcast, where we talk about things from One Life Church, but just ultimately things we think can relate to you and your one and only life. And my name is Sarah Inman, and I'm one of your hosts here of the podcast. And what we've been doing over the past, 3 months or so is talking about some of the amazing things happening in our communities, in our cities, and just some part of the organizations and people who are involved in that. And today, we're very excited to welcome Josh Armstrong to the podcast. So Josh, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Awesome. And then joining us as well is Carron. You guys have heard Michael on the podcast before. He's a producer here at One Life, and
I guess that's my official title now. It's changed quite a bit.
Maybe we just made it.
Yeah,
we just
I'm okay
decided
with
it right here on the podcast. Yeah, part of a worship team, but also just the overall production experience at all of our One Life campuses. So, we're excited to just be able to have some conversation about what Josh does today and kind of how you're connected to downtown Evansville. And so, I would ask first of all, for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your title now.
So I am the president of the Downtown Evansville Economic Improvement District, and let's call it the EID to make it shorter.
Yeah.
The EID is a relatively new organization. We were formed by City Council in November of 2017. So we've had 1 year of funding in place. And an improvement district in Indiana is formed when a majority of property owners raise their hand, and they raise their hand by signing a petition and say, I want to pay more in taxes, but I want special benefits for my properties and my neighbors' properties. And so during 2017, we went through a process where we went to about 305 property owners in the central part of downtown Evansville. This is really the Main Street, Riverside Drive, Medical Campus to Fulton, Lloyd Expressway to the river sort of area. We went to those property owners and we said, here are the services we would like to provide. Here's roughly what they're going to cost. Are you in or not? And once we had a majority of property owners raise their hands, we went to City Council and created the district. So, so that's kind of the funding for what I do. We work in 3 fields or 3 areas. We are engaged in storytelling. So that's branding, marketing, website, social media. You may have seen our billboards around town, new logo, things like that.
Yeah.
Part of that is business recruitment. So we work to attract new businesses and support existing businesses, and also attract new developers and to bring some more projects into downtown. So we've got that piece. We call our next big chunk Clean and Safe.
Okay.
And Clean and Safe is exactly what it sounds like. So if you were in downtown over the last week, you would have seen us putting in 1,000 yellow pansies. And
It's a lot of flowers to
a
plant.
lot of pansies.
Tons and tons and tons of mulch.
Wow.
So all the tree wells everything's freshened up for spring, if it ever gets here. And so also with Clean and Safe, we do some other things. We do graffiti abatement. We do snow and ice removal. So
Oh, really?
Yeah. So only in that central business district, we go through and we clean the sidewalks so people can get around and get to work. Go to events, things like that. The only really big snow we had this year was on a Saturday night. It came like Saturday around 8 p.m. And we have 5 churches in our area. So I went out. It sort of stopped around 8 on that Saturday. I went and I found the crew and I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to clear the bars first. Then you're going to clear the churches for Sunday morning and then go back and get the rest. And so, we knew
places where people are going to be. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So that's another area that we work in, the Clean and Safe. In that we also provide some funding and support to United Caring Services. So we know not everyone in downtown works at a major bank or lives in a luxury condominium. So we try to provide some services over at the United Caring Services. We are the entity pretty much responsible for allowing them to be open between the night service or night mission and the day part. So it used to be everyone had to leave the facility, and now they're able to stay inside. So it gives them access to a safe, warm place and facilities and things like that. So that's part of what we do. And then the other part is we're a quasi-governmental organization. So we have a lot of reporting we have to do. We have a staff, so we have administrative things that we have to do with our ratepayers' money.
Wow. Okay. And so you said just a little over a year so. And then how did that come about? Like, what was that? How did that idea kind of start, and how did it turn into what it is now?
Well, in 2013, the chamber, Southwest Indiana Chamber, had a director who had moved here from Bloomington, and our office, the chamber's office, is in downtown. And she saw that this was an area that did not appear to have focus. And we've had a lot of lucky wins in our downtown, but I don't want to say they're accidental, but they're not planned.
Sure.
People put work into them, but there wasn't at the time a plan. And she started assembling resources to hire someone who could come in and sort of do some old-fashioned, on-the-ground community or business development work for Main Street and for other areas around downtown. And I heard this was happening, and I started to get involved and sort of guide a selection process and ended up with my selection. But I knew it was the right place, the right fit for me, and the right place where I could bring a lot of my skills and passions into the community. And so that's kind of how we got started with the chamber. I knew this when I started there in 2014 when the funding was in place, that I had about 3 years to figure this out, how to get long-term sustainable funding, because our community has a history of forming downtown groups with no sustainable funding, and they last about 3 years because the banks, the utility company, and a few other folks get tired of being the only people paying for it when they're not really seeing the benefit the way the smaller property owners and the smaller business owners do. Not to say that the bank does not receive benefit, for the work I do,
sure.
But when we were in that older format, it was a little bit different. So I knew going in there that my intention was the creation of an improvement district. At the time, Evansville's one of the largest cities in the United States without one of these districts, really the largest being downtown Indianapolis.
Wow.
Yeah, they haven't figured it out yet.
Indiana just doesn't put those together quickly.
They don't. And Manhattan has like 70 of them. Yeah. San Francisco has about 30 of them.
Wow.
And even all throughout the state of Ohio, in cities that are not particularly well off, Akron, Toledo, Dayton, all these communities use the improvement district model. There's over 1,000 across the United States, about 1,500 in North America.
Okay.
Canada loves them. The United Kingdom loves them. It's a tool where these property owners or business owners, it's collected like a tax, but it is directly at their command how these dollars are spent. So it's a real direct benefit back to those property owners.
Sure. So like you said, it kind of gives focus towards a specific part of town, and that's kind of what you're able to do.
Correct. Focus and resources.
Yeah. That's amazing. And we didn't get into this yet, but I'm going to make sure we talk about this, is why Evansville? Like, how did you end up in Evansville, and why is this something that you're passionate about?
Yeah. I'm going to take a couple minutes here to talk about that. I was born and raised in Pasadena, California. And I grew up in a magical time in Southern California. I was born in the early 60s, and it was a great place where I think I told Michael, as a kid, I could take a city bus from Pasadena into downtown at Los Angeles, completely safe, take a city bus with my brother and sister, and we would take a bus for an hour to go to the beach, like in the summer, things that we can't do anymore. But
Right.
It was just absolutely a magical place to grow up. It became not such a magical place to live as it continued to grow and become denser and harder to live in. And I was working for a company there called the Cheesecake Factory, and I was a managing partner, and I had been with the Cheesecake Factories from the time Location 18 opened to the time Location 101 opened.
Wow.
But I was sort of approaching a time when I knew I just could not do that any longer. It was pretty intense. My partner at the time was from here, and we were both, and this was in 2005 when we made the decision, almost the peak of the real estate market there. Stocks were doing great. I was entering a period. I had a short window when I could execute some options that I had with the Cheesecake Factory and contractually exit, and my partner could exit the work, a different situation. So we were both able to figure out a timeline, and it was like, well, why not Evansville?
Yeah.
So we came to Evansville. I opened a restaurant called Firefly Southern Grill, and on the east side, and I made a lot of friends with a lot of people in the community, and so that's kind of what I was doing.
We loved that place when it was so
I remember
good.
Firefly. Yeah,
Oh, man, it was so good.
Now the crazy thing that happened is, and why downtown is so important to me, is there was just this time when I also kind of got lost, like being a business person and, running my own show, and just, even though I had people all around, I was incredibly solitary, and I really didn't handle that well. And so as I closed my first restaurant, I had a second one too. And as I was kind of coming to terms with like a different reality, both an economic reality and a social reality of, and sort of feeling this like this space that was like not like, all the great shoes in the world wouldn't fill the space. All the great vacations in the world wouldn't fill the space. But there was something that could, and that's like, and I've spoken to Michael about this, the spiritual connection that I feel when I'm around other people. And I'll get a little spiritual here for a second, y'all. I say that sometimes.
Gotta throw that in there.
Yeah, from Pasadena, y'all. I have not been fortunate to have enough in my life to have God reach down and pick me up and move me to where I need to be. He has put people there that have done that work for me. And so I have realized that I am nothing without my fellows, because they are my conduit to God.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's hard to have contact with my fellows in a mall parking lot or driving on an expressway. Well, you can have contact. It's just not probably a good kind. And the places where I can have that contact are in urban environments where I can see the same 100 or 200 people a day. They may not know my name, but they recognize me, and where I'm able to build relationships with lots of people in lots of ways, both great and small, from baristas to really deep personal relationships.
Sure.
And so I feel that those things happen most in these kind of places where people are on their feet or, engaging more than they do in sprawling kinds of places. And so I made a decision that my work would be to set a backdrop for other people's healing the way that I had been healed by my fellows.
That is so cool.
I mean, that's a great reason. I'm glad that you shared that for sure.
Well,
and then talking about community in general. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
And I think it because at the time that we talked, what's funny is it's funny that you mentioned the forming of the Economic Improvement District, because I think we met for coffee the first time. It was that same week that you were waiting to like, are these people going? I'm pretty sure it was that week.
Yeah.
That you were waiting. Like we just sent out this mailer to everybody and just said, hey, we're gonna are you guys in for this? We need you to sign this petition if you are. And you were waiting. And then the last time we met up for coffee was a couple months ago. I don't remember. And then we talked about Thomas Merton, There's No Man is an Island, and then New Seeds of Contemplation. And he talks about, I think it's like chapter 7 or chapter 8 or whatever, about how, just kind of like what you were talking about, is we look for God in all these grand places and in these spiritual experiences when we were made in the image of God. So it only stands to reason that our interactions with other people, whether or not they know it or not, whether or not we realize it or not, that is our way to God. He's given us that in other people.
Sure.
The closest thing that we have to an interaction with God is through other people. And so I think it's cool that you mentioned that as just sort of part of your journey, especially here in Evansville. Not being originally from Evansville and having, some experiences and, some restaurants and all of that stuff, to be able to get back to like, you know what, I've experienced God through community, through people. It's just a really profound thing. And you can't you can't make that stuff up. I feel like it's just...
you can't. And again, maybe it's happened. Maybe a hand has come down and moved someone or stopped an airplane from falling. I don't know.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened to me.
Yeah.
But there's been a person there when I needed a person there.
Yeah.
That I wasn't expecting to be there.
Yeah.
And So, it's I feel I'm repaying that to the place that gave it to me when I most needed it.
Yeah, that's great.
So creating spaces for more of that to happen for more people.
Correct. Yeah.
And so how long have you been in Evansville then?
Since 2005, so about 14 years this summer.
Okay. And so that's probably a good timeline to kind of say from when you've been here, from kind of where it is now, downtown.
Yeah.
How have you seen it change?
Well, the downtown changes have been spectacular.
Yeah.
So, the improvement district, well, how does the improvement district relate to my relationship with God? Well, it does, because it's setting up a way to make the community safer, cleaner, nicer, and more attractive to put more people in. How does it benefit our property owners? Through increased property valuation and increased safety, increased pleasure if you live there. So, I think that what I do is both, sacred and quotidian. I mean, it gets both. But, when I first moved here, I really, if I was going downtown, it was, I don't want to say I felt unsafe, because that really wasn't it. I just felt like, why am I downtown?
Yeah.
There just really was not a lot going on. And I'm a big believer that downtowns are very incremental. Anyone who says they've got a cure or fix or something that's going to change downtown, it isn't true. It's a big amount of space with a lot of people in it. It takes a long time and a lot of layers of things to change the community. So I've seen that. I've seen that happen. I think really the first piece of that was when the condominiums that went in at 508 Main Street and the Renaissance condominiums reintroduced middle-class residents to downtown Evansville. Was probably the first piece where something different was happening.
Yeah.
And then after that, there was a loft program that kind of brought in total about 80 homes. And that was a nice start through that, maybe 90 homes. The Ford Center, incredibly important to downtown Evansville. 475,000 visitors a year to that building.
Wow.
And so, that's just a lot of people that are getting dinner before, or grabbing a beer after, or whatever it may be that they're doing, that are putting pressure on the market to respond by more restaurants and more spaces.
Yeah, it's not just about having an event downtown.
Yeah.
It's about the side effects from having a space downtown, something significant, a big landmark down there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now we've seen the medical school.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's just like that whole area right there has changed so much. It's beautiful. They did a great job.
Yeah. Building 2 is underway over there. You can hear downtown grow. So they were doing pilings today. I could hear it in my office. The post house is out of the ground. And so that'll bring 144 top of the market units and about 10,000 square feet of retail space, right around Brew Burger. So just, I think, part of it is we had a series of mayors and business leaders who it was important for them and is important for them, starting with Jonathan Weinsapple, continuing with Mayor Winnicky, the leadership at Vectron, the leadership at Old National, the leadership at German American, companies that didn't have to be there, that made major investments in the community in that central business district. Super important. But the other thing is that people got used to and comfortable coming there. And so, Parlor Donuts is super important. Mm-hmm. Comfort demonstrated that a restaurant open on Sundays could be busy. Nobody thought it. Mm-hmm. So Comfort and Brew.
That's a good point.
Are right.
Yeah, I just don't think about those things, but that makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Encounter Church moving there. First I thought, oh, that's going to be kind of weird. It's like, no, it's perfect. Yeah. They fill a day part. They absolutely. They put people into the community in a time when there normally wouldn't be people. Mm-hmm. So, in that particular part of downtown, because there was no churches there. So it's this incremental layering of a million things, ranging from being able to get I don't know, a real special latte you like, to someone being able to get a medical degree, to someone being able to buy an apartment, to someone just going for a walk on the riverfront. Like, all those things happening at once all together is the magic of an urban space.
Yeah, I was downtown over the weekend actually, and I love people watching in general. It's one of my favorite things to do. And then my mom and I were having lunch downtown at Zuki, and there was a family there, and I could tell it was probably the first time this college. He seemed like he was a college student. He was talking about college, and I was kind of overhearing a few conversations that his parents had been in downtown Evansville, and he's talking about all the things that, oh yeah, you can go do this while we're here, or we'll go do this and we'll go do that. And I was thinking, it just flashback to when I moved here in 2002 and going downtown. Like, I'm sure there were things to do and some, but it's just so different. Like, you don't bring people downtown first, and now that's probably the first place you want to bring people.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful reality to see that change over the past 15 or so years. So it's been great. Yeah. So I guess we'll continue on asking some questions. So what do you wish everyone in Evansville knew about our city?
I wish everyone knew that we are just filled with good intentions, even when somebody doesn't think like you. That I mean, that's something that I think is important.
Yeah.
Look, I frame a lot of my discussions around downtown. So I was talking with someone about a building that had been torn down, and they were like, "Oh, so sad that this building was torn down." First of all, it was torn down in like 1959. I had nothing to do with it. but more importantly, the entity that tore it down had nothing but the best intentions when they were doing that. It was, we think that we need to have, this space for our business. And it's actually, that's what created the parking lot at Zuki's. They had good intentions. So I think that it's important that people know, even when people are different or disagree, I honestly believe everyone's here and just trying to do the best they can.
Yeah.
And probably at the end of the day, if everyone, penciled out a vision, it'd probably be pretty similar all the way across the board.
Yeah.
That people are happy and living safe lives and productive lives and quality lives. Yeah. So I think that's something I'd like people to know. I think we also, you had a great question on there. She sent me the questions before.
You mean
you asked about this like secret space or something?
Yeah. What would you say the city's best kept secret right now?
It's coming really soon. When is this broadcasting, by the way?
This will be on Wednesday, which that date, today's the 25th when we're recording. So
26th, 27th.
27th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's almost about the time for it. Maybe a week or two after that, it'll start to be peak. There's a street called Roosevelt, and it runs from Lincoln to Walnut, and it's 1 block east of Bakey. And this is a street where all the homeowners plant azaleas in the fronts of their homes and have been doing it for decades. But the first house, when you come in off of Lincoln, there's a gate and there's a little sign. And if it says the garden is open, you can go into this family's backyard. And it is like walking through the most magical field or maze or forest of azaleas. Some of these are 8, 10, 12 feet high.
Oh my goodness.
Completely covered in bloom. And I've seen people there take books and sit on the back lawn of this family's home that this family opens to the community for a few weeks every spring when the azaleas are in bloom.
Oh my goodness.
That's amazing.
It's spectacular.
That's my neighborhood. That's where we live in that area. And so we've lived there for 10 years. I never knew that.
It's the best kept secret.
Awesome. Yeah, there you go.
And yeah, you heard it here on the podcast.
That's awesome.
And it sounds like something, I travel to New York frequently and, have multiple places like that, spaces like that where, is it open? Is it not open? Can you go in, you sit and hang out, and you're looking for a quiet place, and that exists right here in our city.
It does. Yeah. And it's, what a gift for someone. We have this and we want to share it. I'm sure some days they probably are like, oh, I really don't want to put the sign out. But
yeah.
Okay, so I had 2 questions for you, if I can. I don't know if I'm allowed to.
Go ahead.
Since Brett's not here, maybe I can I would maintain.
Yeah.
So 2 questions. If you were to give coaching to anybody or some advice to anybody, because you're not from here, you spent a good part of your life not living here. But if you were to give coaching to anybody that just moved here, and you would even mention too some of the although they may think differently than you do, there is sort of this Midwestern or even this southern, people make fun of like, well, it's just Evansville, like, or that's good enough for Evansville.
Yeah.
There's this sort of this mentality that so honestly, we can get mocked for in Evansville just because of whatever. Is there any sort of coaching or advice that you would give to somebody that was a transplant to Evansville, that was new to the Evansville area, and there was a little bit, like, you came from Pasadena, and like there's some culture shock there, and you're an established individual, and you've got your stuff together, and you've had a lot of life experience, and then you have this massive shift to the Midwest. What kind of coaching or advice would you give to somebody that is newer to the Evansville area on that adjustment, on what that life adjustment is like? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, that does. That's a good question, Michael. I think, and there are a couple parts in there. First, when I catch myself thinking that something's good enough for Evansville, or good enough for us, or good enough for me, it probably isn't. If I'm justifying it in that, and that's the only reason to do something. And that came up a couple of weeks ago. Here's a best kept secret. I have formed a development corporation called the Downtown Evansville Community Development Corporation, and we are in the process of establishing site control to build some buildings in downtown. And one of our funders, we're working on our strategic plan, actually more than that, like our marching orders for a couple of years, like give us exact orders what to do. And he was reviewing these responses, and he said, I caught myself saying this is good enough for Evansville, picking up one of the less expensive responses. And I had done the same thing, and it's like, no, that's not good enough. That isn't. If our population doesn't grow one bit, we still deserve to have the best community that we can possibly have here. We deserve to have beautiful parks. We deserve to have schools that do a great job and that are safe and clean. We deserve quality opportunities for people in terms of work, because that, I think, talk about God. I mean, that's like a real God thing. Is like, how do you do the work that's put in front of you? And like, if the work that's put in front of you is not good work,
right,
and you're paid in a way that doesn't let you live, that's a pretty bad message.
Right.
But I think, if you're sitting there saying it's good enough, it isn't good enough. I think the other thing is, when I got here, it was right at the end of phone books, and I used to be able to pick up the phone book and call people. So someone would say, you need to meet so-and-so. And I would pick up the phone book and find their name and number and call them. And, I can't do that anymore, but I can through social media and through really being intentional and asking for, people to make introductions. I can kind of put people together, or I can find a way to get to talk to the person that I need to talk to. I think the other thing is, if you're here and you're thinking, get out there and make a change. If it's not right for you, just figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
Raise your hand and ask for help. That's the first part of any big project, is like, I don't know how to do this, but I want to.
Yeah.
Who knows how to do this?
I think it's interesting. I had never thought about, you said, because I remember growing up, our phone number was in the phone book, 812-838-3699. That's what our phone number was growing up.
Somebody going to call that now,
no,
Michael?
Someone's going to answer it.
Yeah.
Well, and I remember
I
was on the phone with a friend that was we were looking at the phone. You know how your number used to spell out, like,
right. What does it spell?
It was Foxy, 838 Foxy. And I was like, yes. And of course, this was this weird, backward, awkward kid that liked to sing in musicals and ran Bible studies and stuff. So Foxy was really provocative for me.
Really racy.
Getting crazy.
In Posey County. So
and you see where I am now. But there's almost like this with the rise of cell phones, there's almost like this privatization of like, so social media really is that connect. So I hadn't really thought about that. So if somebody newer, like, your connection to that stuff is downtown, it is a community of people, it is social media, finding that in somewhere, because very easily you end up getting very introverted just by virtue of the fact that you're new to the area and you don't have a way to. So there have to be on ramps to meet new people. You
have to do a piece of that work yourself too.
Yes.
And I speaking of social media, I saw something I posted a couple of years ago. But there's all these circles that we get stuck in all kinds of ways in our life, and one is the person who treats loneliness with isolation, and that's a really easy thing to get into. And then that isolation grows like a fur on you, and then it's your protection, but all it is also is a rot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So get out there, and try to find those people, or ask, really ask for help. Ask, try to get involved somewhere. Yeah. Try to find a community somehow.
Yeah.
And if a church is the right place for you, then, find a church you're comfortable going to. If it's something different, be the person that walks at 4 p.m. every day on the same block. Create habits. That's something else I learned here in Evansville is, the power of repetition in my life, the power of practice and how important that is. And I wasn't a student athlete. I didn't learn that. I wasn't a student musician. I didn't learn that. And I have learned now, whether it's I want this outcome in my community, I want this physical outcome for myself, I want to deepen my relationship with God, I want to do all these things. All of them have a practice behind them, whether that's, making 3 calls a day to people I don't know, eating the right food and trying to exercise,
right, setting
aside 5 minutes in the morning for very highly intentional prayer. And I kind of was a successful guy that just, I guess, kind of lucked out. I just didn't know those things.
Yeah.
And wow, if you're in Evansville, that's another thing. It's like, try to figure out what those are. Make them public. Let people see it.
Yeah.
And then let people hold you accountable for those behaviors too.
One of the things we've been talking about on the podcast and through our series we just kind of wrapped up was there are so many great organizations doing things, and so often we feel like we have to start them, and sometimes we are the ones that start them. Sometimes that's what is needed for sure, but also there's organizations that you can partner with, that are already in Evansville and Henderson and, surrounding communities that are doing great things. But even taking, like the phone book idea or social media or just searching through the internet, what are those? Like, what are those things that I'm passionate about? And how can I connect with someone who's kind of already established on some of those things? And I think that's it's cool to see the both sides, starting something, making it happen, but also partnering with some people that are already doing those things.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had a lot of people that have come up to us because we were in a Josh worship center of the church downtown, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So we've been in a series called Build, and it's changing the story of your city. We have this value statement that says we don't just want to build great churches, we want to build a great city, build great cities both locally and globally. So we've got our 2 campuses here in Evansville. We've got one right across the river in Henderson. So a lot of this stuff applies
absolutely
directly to what's happening in Henderson, affects what's happening in Myanmar and in Central Asia, where we're doing work, and in the Balkans. But we've had a lot of people over the last couple of weeks that have just been really energized and excited by this series, and have come up and just said, well, I feel like I've got this passion for something, and I just don't know what to do with it. So if you have somebody that came to you and said, I know your context is primarily downtown, but if you had somebody that came to you and said, I've got this passion for that, I've got this stirring in me, I want to do something for a one life person, for a one lifer, we can sound like a cult by saying one lifer, but I'll say it anyway. For a one lifer, it's just, that's in our DNA. That's who we are. It's just sort of like, that's not just the church. That's not a church program. That is you being a part of your city. So if you had somebody that came to you and said, hey, I want to start this, I want to be a part of doing this, I'm really, really excited, and this is in the downtown context, what would be the first step for them, like a practical first step? Like, I want to start something, I want to do this. What would you say? And I know not knowing exactly.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, well, what are they trying to do?
If they wanted to start a business, or if they wanted to start a nonprofit, or if they wanted to start some sort of initiative, what would be the first step?
So the first step, if someone wants to start a business in the 9 counties in Southwest Indiana, is to go to the Indiana Small Business Development Center. And Kim Howard and her team there do an amazing job providing free services funded by the Small Business Administration. 99% of what they do there is free. So if you are out there and you think you want to start a business, register, I think you just go to isbdc.org or just Google Indiana Small Business Development Center. From data, demographics, psychographics of your consumer, free business plans, to getting you set up for capital searches, even some simple questions. They have an accountant on staff, they have a marketing person on staff, and they have a banker, a semi-retired commercial lender on staff, plus all complete access to the Small Business Administration with everything that they're able to do. So I always, if you want to do a business, go there, talk to them, and they're going to help you really understand, is this a business that is viable? Not every business is viable. Yeah. If you want to start a small profit, I think the first step is to really look and see, is there someone out there doing something similar to where you could be involved in that? There are only so many donors. And I don't think that we have yet seen the full giving consequences of the 2017 Tax Act. But as you hear that people are getting less back, I think they're realizing that, all the contributions, except, for certain really high income people, is not going to really make a difference on their taxes anymore. So, I should always be giving for love or whatever it may be. But
it does affect.
But it does affect that. So I think we have to be cognizant of that resource stream. I'd suggest that somebody really looks and sees what it is, that they want to do, and how they can get involved with someone that may already be doing that. My introduction to volunteerism in Evansville was pulling weeds and getting involved in cleaning up the parks in my community, and carrying. I used to, and I still do, sometimes walk to work. And if I do, I sometimes grab not a garbage bag, but I'm like a horrible person because I don't always take my bags to the grocery store, but I try to fill it with things on the way back. There's so many little things we can do too. But I think the nonprofit question is really make sure that you're not duplicating an effort. Right. And if you are, that doesn't mean that your idea isn't great.
Right.
It means maybe they haven't thought of this last little piece of it.
Yeah. So the idea there is to just find some commonality with some people that are already, for unity's sake, if not for nothing else, like to be on the same page. So you can kind of put some things in your tool belt too.
Exactly. And at least at the very least learn from someone else that's doing it.
Yeah.
And understand, is it, is that really what you want to do? Maybe what you want to do is 30 degrees off from that. Yeah. But for a year, it might be a great way to learn what they're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. That's cool.
That's terrific. And we're a little bit over on time, but it's always fun to get in these conversations. I mean, it's fascinating. I love hearing, just your passion for what you're doing, but also the way it seems very ease of access for anyone to be able to jump into some of these things, that are already happening, that are going on, that just being a part of and showing up to them. We talked about this with Ross Chapman a few weeks ago. So often we'll talk about all these great things that are going on in the city, but we don't actually take part in them. So there's a two sides of that. We can talk about them, but also being a part of what's going on, showing up at a Parlor Donuts or showing up, at some of these places that are new. We want to make sure they're successful as well. So, yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today, Josh.
Hey, it was great. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Guys, we will see you again next week. And hopefully Brett will be back with us again. We've missed him the past 3 weeks. But thank you, Michael, again for joining us as well.
You.
And,
this was fun.
Yeah, it's always fun to have conversations with people, just learning more about what's great in our city. So
yeah, and I think it's cool to have somebody from outside of One Life to bring some perspective. It's just really cool.
Yeah. So awesome. Thank you guys again. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the One Life Church podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and subscribe. That way you'll get an alert anytime there's a new episode. If there was something that you heard that you really want other people to know, share it out on social media. You can use the hashtag OLPodcast. To ask us a question here at the podcast, you can email us at podcast@onelifechurch.org. I'm one of your co-hosts, Sarah Inman, and I produced this episode. Our music is produced by Micah Robertson and Ben Brock.